The Hawkeye run game looked better last week against Purdue. Can it continue against Wisconsin? What did we see? We talked to a former Hawkeye and get the breakdown of the run game. LeShun Daniels joins us today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I'm Trent Condon. He's LeShun Daniels, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you get podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. While you're there, it helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. LeShun, welcome back. And, well, we got to see the run game going. We got to see a little bit out of Caleb Johnson. And it is such a necessary element, obviously, for this Hawkeye team. 20-14 homecoming win against the Boilermakers. Let's start right there. What you saw overall, 2014, the win, and getting that ground game going.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely obviously big help to have Caleb back in the lineup. Obviously, we saw it early, creating explosive play. Obviously, when you have explosive plays like that, that's what offenses want. That's what you're trying to do as an offense. Explosive plays help you win football games, and starting off early in that game was a pretty big deal. So having him back was I feel like a huge help for the team, and obviously just kind of want to build on that momentum from last week because obviously Wisconsin is always a tough opponent. Has always been tough, especially against us in the run game. So definitely gonna have to try to build on that momentum to have success this weekend.
Want to get into a few different plays that we saw. We'll get into the big touchdown early in the game that opened things up as Iowa jumped out to an early lead in that one. But before we get into that, and you look at this team, what they're doing in Caleb Johnson this offseason, going back to last season, LeShun, when we did the podcast together for the first time, I think we both saw right away how special he looked. I mean, he's just a combination that Iowa hasn't had with the power and the speed, the physicality. I mean, he's kind of custom built, right? I mean, you want your running back 5'11, 215 pounds, 220 with the speed that he has. They're hard to find, but Iowa has him. We found out this week that he was banged up before the season began. He got rolled up on a couple weeks before and then dealt with that ankle throughout the Iowa State game, sat out a couple of games before he was back. Because early in the season, before we knew about that injury, LeShun, he didn't look like the same guy, at least I thought. And I think you thought the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, it was just something early on. Just felt like he just wasn't hitting the hole, probably like that we were really used to. Like everything just kind of seemed, I don't know, just iffy. Wasn't necessarily sure of himself, and I think that's part of that ankle. I mean, dealing with or whatever it was, I think it was ankle. So whatever, like when running backs are dealing with things like that, like it's not easy to go out there and play. 'Cause, I mean, I dealt with the same thing in 2015. Hurt my ankle in the Iowa State game, and then never really got right. Probably until like we played Indiana that year, where I felt like okay, and it's something that just lingers. And like if you try to play on it, it never really heals. And because of that, you're trying to protect yourself like a little bit more. So you might be a little bit more tentative in the hole. You might not be so sure of it because you don't want to, run inside, and then next thing you know, someone falls on your leg, and then now you got to come out and deal with that. So definitely taking that time to get back and get that health back is very important as a back. So obviously we definitely could have used them, but it's much better to obviously sit out, take that time, and wait for that ankle to heal up before you get back out there. So yeah, as you mentioned, that's how you want your running backs built. You want them, that size, that speed, be able to take a run from maybe a possible 10-yard play to a 50-yard touchdown. So obviously being healthy is the only way that you really can be able to do that. So yeah, I'm anxious to kind of see how Caleb builds on last week, and we see you're gonna have a pretty big test this weekend.
So we also saw LaShawn Williams. He looked really good, I thought, and that's just better. He's better in that role, right? As the complementary piece, the guy that more third down back. He's really good as a pass blocker. Caleb did not look very good as a pass blocker, and that's another thing too. Still coming back from ankle, not getting the reps. Not a surprise on that one, and we'll see. Jazzion Patterson getting him back and adding him to the mix. That's going to be important. Maybe by the Minnesota game, we'll be able to see him once again. But 134 yards for Caleb Johnson, including that a touchdown run of 67 yards. Let's talk about that play because it just looks so odd. And right before we started the podcast today, you and I both were going back and looking at it. It looks so weird. And I was wondering if I would did something differently. And as we were watching it, it's kind of not really. It was just, what the hell was Purdue doing defensively?
Yeah. Purdue defensively, I mean, they probably just got ripped apart on that play.
Yeah.
I mean, like you go back and watch it, it's nothing special. It's just an inside zone play with tight end stealing on the backside. I mean, you're gonna see that look probably a million different times, maybe at different personnels, maybe it'll be a fullback doing it, but all teams probably have a similar looking play. And you got linebackers and safeties just poor eye discipline, running completely out of the gap. Like like I've told you before this, like your average social media user probably could have got 5 yards on that play. Like that's how bad their run fits were on that play. So um but that's kind of what we were talking about though earlier, like a few weeks back when I talked about, zone running and where I felt um Caleb has a pretty big impact just because of his body type and his skill set. Like it feels like he fits that zone running scheme. And obviously, when teams vacate, their gaps the way that they did against a running back like that, it's just going to create an explosive play. So
With those pieces, and I think you bring up something really good there, LaShawn. The patience that you see from Caleb works really good with his own blocking scheme. And as we're running more ISO, more hat on hat stuff, that probably works better for LaShawn and both Jazzy on better. They're both guys that get the ball go straight ahead, right? There's not a whole lot of wiggle, not the same kind of patience we see from Caleb. I mean, that has to be something that Brian Ferentz also has to understand too, right? As an offensive play caller, you have to understand the differences between your running backs because you guys all have different styles.
yeah, no doubt. And you want to lean on those strengths very, very heavily. And when you know that maybe LeSean and Jazzion, are more kind of downhill guys, like, hey, they want to get the ball and they want to hit the gap extremely fast. Like you want to lean into that a little bit more because it's going to help your run game, it's going to help your offense. And then when you have a guy like Caleb, who's a little bit more patient runner, but like once he hits the hole, like he's hitting it at a million miles per hour, like you want to go ahead and use those zone runs because that's going to help you uh, create those opportunities for much bigger plays where typically a lot of those gap scheme plays a lot of times we previously used them in a lot of short yardage just because again you want to hit it quick, you're just trying to get a couple yards, but obviously now they're integrating it a little bit more on regular first and second down. So yeah, you definitely have to know the personnel that you have, but also that's part of the reason why that they've got to kind of get more creative in how they use their personnel groupings and how you call your offense because again, while Caleb may be special at zone runs, a lot of zone runs you can't you really have to have numbers or you don't really have success with that. Whereas in the gap scheme runs, you can kind of run it even if you don't have favorable numbers, just because again you're just trying to basically cut the defense versus letting the running back pick and choose their holes. So yeah, you definitely have to obviously play to each running back's strengths and see Coach Brian has been doing that with the guys that he has in. So as they get healthier in the backfield, I would anticipate seeing a little bit more diversity in the run game than probably what we had, the first few weeks of the season.
So the run game improved. The passing game did not improve. Let's get into that side and that part of the offense. 6 of 21 for Deacon Hill. He got better as the game went on, but he still wasn't great by any means. The accuracy remains a really big concern, and I don't think it's anything that you can fix in season. That's not going to be a realistic possibility. Can he get better? Sure. But to expect him all of a sudden to turn into a 65% passer is just an unlikely scenario. Get that thing north of 50 is kind of
Yeah.
what we're shooting for here, and probably a realistic goal for him the rest of the way. What did you see out of him? Amped up early on, a lot of balls sailing out, and maybe any kind of hope you can glean out of it going forward.
Yeah, definitely a tough showing. But the thing that I did like was that even though he wasn't completing passes, probably at the rate that he was expecting, the team was expecting, we were expecting, he kept throwing it, right? Like
Mhm.
it wasn't like he was getting gun shy. He was still going out there and he was letting it rip. And I think that is encouraging, just because you're like, okay, well, at least he's not losing that confidence, at least from our vantage point, right? He's not losing that confidence because again, he took that shot to Eric all late in the game, and hey, that he was still kind of feeling it, like he was like, okay, I'm not too down on myself, so that is encouraging. But obviously, you gotta wind it back a little bit. You got a can of an arm. There's sometimes some of those passes, like, hey, like maybe if it's 15 yards down the field and you're trying to fit in a tight window, you're like, yeah, you can throw a bullet fast, but hey, when you're throwing, especially to us running backs, like you can't throw it that fast.
Yeah.
We're only a few yards away from you, and then even on some of those quick routes, even though again the receivers probably think like, hey, we should be bringing those in, but still you want to kind of ease off on that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some things there, and I like the way that he was trying to spread the ball around and get other people involved. It's just we gotta we gotta calm ourselves down a little bit, and try to make the makeables, especially those easy completions, and have those, because again, that's going to keep you on schedule, that's going to keep you in rhythm, and then you're not going to have to feel like you have to necessarily force it, because although Purdue has had a number, uh, in the past, right, it's going to be a lot different going up to Wisconsin, especially where you just were at school. Like you're really going to be try to be amped up.
Yeah.
You know it's a rivalry game. You know that this is some pretty big Big Ten West title implications. So like you're gonna have to be able to calm yourself down and make those makeable plays. So the like I said, I think the thing that brought me a little gleamer of hope was just the fact that he didn't lose confidence throughout that game. Like he kept
Mhm.
throwing it, and he was still willing to take those shots downfield.
Well, we're going to talk more about that game. Facing off against Wisconsin, we'll talk to LeShun about what's it like to be a player on the sidelines there at Camp Randall, jump around going into the fourth quarter. What's that like? We will do that as we continue here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I've made hires. I've had things for my small business that I have to do in the hiring space. It is incredibly stressful, and LinkedIn Jobs helps solidify and make a little bit of that ease come your way. Add your job in the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile. That spreads the word that you are hiring. And they have simple tools like screening questions. It makes it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/locked on college. Again, that is linkedin.com/locked on college to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Trent LeShun back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So we get into the matchup with Wisconsin. Before we break the game down a little bit here, LeShun, we also got our picks coming up for the week as we pick 5 games against the spread every single week. Let's start first, just the environment. Camp Randall, been there many times. I've told our listeners in the past, got family in Madison, went to a lot of games growing up, and back in the 80s, it was great because Wisconsin stunk. I mean, they were terrible. They tried to run the veer for a couple of years. They were just awful. And it was basically, it was one of those road games where there'd be, 15, 20,000 Hawkeye fans in the stands, and it'd be a party in Madison. Not the case anymore, obviously, of what that program's morphed into over the last 3 decades. But LeShun, what is it like going there, the jump around going in the fourth quarter, just overall as an environment in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think their environment is great, especially when you get to the fourth quarter and the students actually show up now and they
Yeah.
they fill it up like kind of
We're
early in
late
the
arriving.
yeah, they're late arriving student section. Like early on in the game, it's not too bad. Like it's not really doesn't really get like that loud because again, big part of the student section is missing. But once you get into that second half and you're down on that end, like it can get pretty loud. And obviously the jump around is fun to be involved. Usually, especially when you're in the game, right? And the
Mhm.
only time I played up there was 2015, and we all remember that 2015 game with the fumble on the goal line. Like we all remember that. So obviously that made it a pretty good experience. So
That was a good one. And Stave getting his foot stepped on. Who came up with the ball on that one? I'm trying to remember.
was
Oh,
it who was it? Was it Nate Meyer or was
I
it?
think yep, I
It
think you're right.
might have been Nate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might have
Yeah.
been Nate.
That was a good one there. So, I mean, that was a tight game.
Mhm.
We've seen it in the past. Now it's usually teams up a couple of scores on Wisconsin, and then all of a sudden the visitors start getting into it a little bit more
Yeah.
with the jump around. Were you guys hyped up on the sidelines going into that?
I think like everyone was. I don't think everyone was like too hyped up. Like people were hyped, but people were like probably like more hyped up on the inside. But we weren't like dancing around or anything like that. I guess everyone for the most part was pretty locked in because like everyone understood kind of the how special this game was and to obviously come out with the victory there. Especially we haven't really we didn't have that much success against Wisconsin over the past few years at that point. So I think everyone was pretty locked in.
Well, we have some struggles moving the football against this team here over well, a long time, but certainly in the Brian Ferentz era. Last year, Iowa won the game with 146 yards of total offense. 2 years ago in Camp Randall, 156. The high water mark in Madison in the Brian Ferentz regime came in 2019. They put up 295 in that game. That was the one where Nate Stanley got crunched down at the 1 yard line on the 2 point conversion as he was trying to run it in and lost 24-22. And then the low water mark, 2017. Fresh off putting 55 up against Ohio State, Iowa puts up 66 yards of total offense, gets shut out outside of two Josh Jackson pick sixes in that one. It has not been pretty for the Hawkeyes. So start with this, just the simplest terms. And I know it's a different staff. Jim Leonard isn't there anymore. He's helping out Bielema now at Illinois, but it's still a 3-4. Start with that part of it.
Yeah.
Iowa's offense, what you guys want to do, and how the difficult nature against an odd man front like a 3-4.
Yeah. Well, first off, you got to kind of understand, the odd fronts, right? So they're coming with three down linemen, and typically it's going to be three down linemen, and they're going to have four backers. Where typically the two outside backers are almost like edge players, essentially. Think, TJ Watt. The thing about 3-4 defenses is that they can do an extremely good job of disguising what they are doing, whether it's guys that are blitzing, guys that are on coverage, like because they have more, I guess, more of those hybrid players versus, that extra down lineman. Like they can move those guys around and they can do different things. And they want to essentially, especially like when you think about the run game, they want to make the offenses run the V. So what does the V look like? So you've got the three down linemen and you've got the outside backers, right? So you on the 3-4. So obviously you're gonna have the I guess the defensive ends for those down linemen. They're going to be a little bit tighter than your typical 4-4-3 front, and because of that, like they want you to essentially run outside of those guys. They want to plug that inside and force you to run outside because they've got those big kind of hybrid outside linebacker
Mhm.
types that are going to force you to string out the play and then make the tackles there. So it makes it difficult to go and run your typical inside zone plays because again that area is plugged. There is opportunity for to run the stretch plays and the outside zones, but you have to do an extremely good job of see cutting off what is typically going to be a four-eye defensive end. So four eyes, a guy who's lined up on the inside shade of the tackle, and then you have to do a great job of keeping the outside linebacker from compressing the edge down. So it makes it very, very difficult because those are typically going to be stout guys on the defensive end side, and then really hybrid athletic guys on the edges that can move around extremely well. So you have to do a great job of preventing that penetration, and this is where those gap runs are going to come into play a little bit more, and you can have that success because you can essentially, like I mentioned earlier, you can split the defense in half. You can make have the definitive line because again, everyone's just blocking down on a gap versus moving towards the zone and trying to stretch those players out. So when you think about Iowa's offense, obviously I would expect a little bit more of the gaps, the counters, the power plays, and more of the stretch zones and outside zones versus our typical inside zone plays. So that's what you kind of up against when you're going against that 3-4 defense or out front, especially in the run game.
Wisconsin this year, Luke Fickell taking over, Phil Longo, the new offensive coordinator. They're still running the football. They're 16th in the country right now in rush offense, averaging over 200 yards per game. Total offense, 54th in the country. Mordecai hasn't been great, but though they're running out of a spread, they're doing just that. They're running out of a spread, and it's still very much with Braylon Allen, a run-based offense. Defensively, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. This defense, not what we're used to. It's still good. It's 27th in the country in total defense. Rush defense up there as well. 53 in total defense, rush defense at 27. So the statistical profile, a couple things jumped out. How you're going to be able to beat this team is with plays down the field. Well, what is the strength of Deacon Hill? It's that strong arm. I made this argument earlier in the week. Hey, you got to make a couple of big plays in the passing game. It's kind of, I don't know, it's just almost a throwaway line at times when you're breaking games down. I believe if I was really going to have a chance here, it's going to be 5 or 6 plays they're going to have to make up the field in the passing game because the likelihood that the run game has a great game is very, very low. Can they be okay? Can they be adequate? Maybe. But if Deacon can hit probably 5, 6 passes at 20 plus yards, I think that's the only way that Iowa can move the football. 2, I don't think it's enough. I got to see it up near a half dozen on the way. And I think you can do that is if you can get protection, and the pass protection's been good this year. I think you can do that against this Wisconsin team. You see anything there? Is there at least a possibility? I'm trying to sell some hope.
Yeah, well, see, for starters, Deacon Hill's very familiar with Wisconsin, and going against their defense on assuming really a weekly basis last year. Obviously, it's going to be different. There's going to be different wrinkles, but obviously, like the bones structure for the most part is going to be similar. But it's really going to start first and foremost up front. As I mentioned in the run game, because of an odd front, the defense has a lot of ability to disguise what they're doing and disguise who's coming on rushing and who's dropping back on pass coverage. So you're gonna have to be really dialed in offensive line and running back and pass protection to make sure that you're picking up guys. You can't have free runners. You can't have guys that are unaccounted for. When you think about the blocking scheme. Obviously, there might be times where they might bring more guys than we have to block, and obviously then the quarterback has to handle that. You have to throw hot or whatever. So, but obviously up front, it's gonna have to. That's where everything's gonna really start. If you can't protect, it's not gonna really matter what plays you have dialed up for the receivers down the field. But then after that, yeah, like you mentioned, you're gonna have to attack downfield. You're gonna have to open these guys up a little bit and keep them from condensing everything in the run game so tight and inside the box and force them to back off a little bit, force them to maybe have to, drop an extra guy in coverage or have to do an extra wrinkle on the back end to kind of open things up for you to have success in the run game and help you stay on schedule. And the way that you're going to be able to do that is obviously having success in the passing game. Can you hit, a deep shot or even an intermediate shot in that, 10 to 15 yard range and force them to respect the passing game even a little bit is going to be a big part on how Iowa is going to be able to have success on the offensive end and how that's going to be able to provide them some success to potentially win the football game.
Well, we will get into our thoughts on this game. We'll break it down as we will make our picks this week, presented by FanDuel. Each and every week, LeShun and I make picks against the point spread. 5 games, the 5 big games in the college football and Big Ten landscape. We will do that as we continue. And one of us was undefeated last week. We'll tell you who when we come back. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by FanDuel. Step into action this NFL season with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers out there, time to get on board. You're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That is incredible. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app, it's super easy to use and a ton of options that you can bet on. Not just the point spread, Iowa getting 10 this weekend against Wisconsin. They got player props, they got over-unders, they got same-game parlays all over the place. So many different ways for you to play at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Trent and LeShun back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, and it is time for our weekly picks. Yes, somebody went undefeated last week. It was me. 4-0-1. We got the push in the Maryland-Ohio State game, but finally came up with some winners, and I'm starting to track you down now. I'm only a game back in our season-long standings here, and well, we got something on the line coming up here in less than a month as we'll be meeting in Chicago. If you're heading to Chicago for the Iowa Northwestern game, we will be doing a live show on Friday, November 3rd, the day before the game from Merkel's. It's the Hawkeye Bar in Wrigleyville. Going to be there throughout the day. Going to be a ton of fun. Looking forward to that. And LeShun, looking forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah, no, it'll be. I think it'll be a great time. Obviously, looking forward to getting together, talking football, talking Hawks, and it'll be a great time. Obviously, interacting with other Iowa fans that are there. So yeah, I'm super pumped for that.
It's going to be a great time, no doubt about it. Well, let's kick things off here. Great slate of games this week, and I think at the top of our list this week, it is the game of the week. Game day will be there. I'm so looking forward to this game. Oregon, they are getting 3 at Washington. Of course, we'll get to see both these teams coming up in future years as they are joining the Big Ten starting next season. My nephew went to school and went to undergrad at Washington. Said incredible environment. My sister and my brother-in-law, they said when they went out there to visit him, just an incredibly beautiful campus, the stadium right on the water. They said a football scene, and they do the sailgating instead of tailgating. They're doing it on a boat. I mean, it's big time out there in Seattle. That's going to be a really cool one here. Should be a great environment. Ducks getting 3. And since I won the week, I'll go first here. I like Oregon. When I look at this matchup, I've liked Washington all year long. I've invested in Washington. I got a lot of futures on them. I got a 25-1 ticket on the national championship. I got them a couple in the Pac-12. But Oregon, when you look at the 4 units, Oregon has one. I think there's a decided advantage. Their defense is quite a bit better than the Washington defense. And because of that, 2 great offenses here. I'm going to grab the points. Give me Oregon.
Yeah, I was leaning the exact same way. I mean, their defense has been so good. Really, ever after that Texas Tech game, I feel like they've just been absolutely just locked in and have been basically putting the beat down on a lot of teams. Obviously, they haven't played, spectacular teams since then. But even though you look at Colorado, they still have a really good offense and basically made it look like they were non-existent offense out there. So I'm leaning with you exactly there. I think that their defense is what's going to make the difference in this game, especially going on the road. That's what's going to quiet the crowd a little bit and keep them keep that momentum from getting too big on Washington side. So give me Oregon.
Pick number 2, it is in the ACC, undefeated North Carolina against who we thought was going to be undefeated Miami until the decision not to kneel it down, running back at 99 yards. One more carry, what can hurt? Well, you can lose the football game. What a crazy one that was. Now, how does Miami get off the mat? They're getting 3.5 in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to be able to bounce back after that one. I mean, like, that's just such a heartbreaking loss. Like, everyone, obviously that was watching it, probably just couldn't believe their eyes. I couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, there was linemen on their team that, like, when you go back and you look at it, like, they couldn't believe it. And yeah, I don't think that they're going to be able to bounce back, especially against a really good football team, led by a superstar quarterback and Drake May. So give me UNC. I feel like that week from last week that Georgia Tech game last week against Miami is going to be just too much of a downer for them to bounce back this week.
I was in the same spot as you, LeShun. I was kind of thinking the same kind of thing. And then it went back because Cristobal also had something like this that happened when he was at Oregon and let a game slip away by not kneeling it out. And there would have been a couple of ticks left. But anyway, the next week they came back and beat a top 25 team. I don't know if they come back and win, but I'm going to grab the points here. Cristobal's done it before, got his team off the mat. So I'm going to grab the points here as we are opposites in Miami and North Carolina. USC at Notre Dame. Boy, watched all of USC, Arizona. That was a lot of fun. I was telling you before we went on the air here, my bartender around the corner at the corner pub, She was trying to close out her money line parlay, $2 to win 175 on FanDuel. All she needed was Arizona to win, and of course, it didn't come to fruition. But watching that one, a really fun game. This USC defense is absolutely broken, though. Notre Dame, I think they had the look ahead spot. We talked about that a little bit last week. It was just a terrible spot. I didn't like Louisville as a team. I just hated the spot for Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame cuts off the mat here. I just see too many warts in this USC team defensively. I'm going to take the Irish minus the 2.5.
Yeah, I feel like this is the game that really is probably just that's gonna end up preventing USC probably from competing for a national championship, to be honest, because you look at their defense and it's just been absolutely just abysmal. Bad all around. They really can't stop anything. They can't stop the pass, can't stop the run. And because of that, uh, and going on the road, it's not going to be it's not going to be easy environment. So because of that, give me Notre Dame. I feel like their offense is good enough to keep it close, but their defense is what's going to make up that difference. And the fact that USC can't stop anyone is what's going to be the difference, I think, in this football game. So
We go to the SEC next. You get the first choice here. Texas A&M, after I think letting one slip away against Alabama. There were winnable opportunities. Jimbo using one of his timeouts to kick a field goal. That was just absolutely head scratching there. They go to Tennessee. The Vols coming off a bye week. 3 is the number. Aggies getting 3 in Knoxville.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting game. Obviously, you're anxious to see how does A&M bounce back from, again, a tough loss last week where see they probably felt like they should have won that game. I mean, they're in it, they made big plays. So because of that, I think that they're going to be able to bounce back. I don't know if they'll be able to win this football game, but I do think that they have the potential to keep it close. Because again, they've got good football players, even though they had probably some coaching blunders that they probably wish they could have had back last week. I think they have a good football team, and I think they have the potential to keep this one close, even on the road.
So you're going to take A&M and
Yep.
the 3. I've been back and forth in this game. I've been waffling. I'll take Tennessee. We'll just go a little bit different on this one. This is one I will definitely not have this part of my plays for Saturday. As it's a throw my hands up, and I'm just gonna sit back and watch. We'll wrap it up as we do each and every week. It is the Iowa game. Hawkeyes, they are a 10-point underdog in Wisconsin. People that have been listening to me this week, I think they know where I stand on this one. I just don't have any belief in Deacon Hill at this point that he's going to be able to sustain drives to move it forward. Wisconsin is not an explosive team this year, but they know how to grind it out. And in fact, I kind of see something much like we saw in the Penn State game. Offense can't get anything going, can't move the football. Defense gets tired in the second half, and Wisconsin eventually runs away. I got the Badgers winning this one 30-6, and I will take Wisconsin big in this matchup.
Yeah, I'm leaning the same way with going with Wisconsin. Reason being is you just mentioned it. Offense, it feels like we can't really sustain anything. Feels like even when we get something good going, like it ends up just being a punt at the end of the day. Like you might get 2 first downs and we still like we feel like yeah we're moving the football and then it still ends up in a punt. And really with Deacon, I hope that he goes out there and plays lights out. But right now, I haven't seen anything that's going to tell me that. And the fact of the matter is, because of that, they're going to be able to crowd the box and not let us run the football. So I got Wisconsin and the points. And because again, the defense isn't as strong as it's been in the past year, still really good. The defense isn't going to be able to hold up for that entire 60 minutes being on the field for 35 plus minutes. So give me the Badgers.
A disappointing couple of picks for us here at the end. Prove us wrong, Hawks, and let's get this one. Not just covering. Let's win this football game. Obviously, the winner of this one in control of the Big Ten West. We'll be back next week to break things down. It'll be the stinking Gophers on tap next as Minnesota will make their way down to Kinnick Stadium. For LeShun Daniels, I'm Trent Condon. LeShun, appreciate it as always. We'll talk again next week.
Yes, sir. Go Hawks.